first time I moved out of Brazil and I lived abroad, I was 21 years old and I was an exchange student at the Faculty of Law of the University of Oslo. And I noticed that each time I would meet someone, I would be hanging out with new friends and they would ask me, "Where are you from?" So I would say, "I'm from Brazil." And their eyes would immediately lighten up and people would be automatically happy. They had a very good association of Brazil, and it was just before the World Cup, the Olympics. And then they asked me, "And what do you study?" And I would say law, and then all that brightness in their eyes would fade away and they would be less excited, but still Brazil won a little bit, and it was more important than the law part, and I can make new friends. But with the story, what I aim to say is that we have some associations with some groups, classifications, nationality being one of them. And sometimes they are good associations, sometimes they are bad associations. In any case, they are usually based on stereotypes and certain general assumptions that we have concerning a specific group. And the issue is that that group is generally not homogeneous, and what you get from an individual may be very different from what the general idea is about a certain collectivity. Maybe the culture changed, even if it didn't change. Individual perceptions, attitudes may be different, but still there is something to this. There's something to culture. Culture is generally a collective way in which symbols, actions are organized, the way you speak, the way you communicate. Sometimes when different cultures they come together, there are certain misunderstandings. I recently moved to Germany to work as a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Human Rights in Erlangen-Nürnberg. And when I arrived in here, the Welcome Center of the university organized this event called Understanding the Germans, an Introduction to Intercultural Awareness. And I wanted to share here some of the points that really piqued my interest particularly and share some of the ideas. So come with us to discuss a little bit of this important issue with us. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to know more about human rights and sustainability. This event was held by one of the persons that work in the Welcome Center. Her name is Kirsten, and she was great in her presentation. And she introduced us to the theories of Hall, a US-American anthropologist, and also Hofstede, a Dutch psychologist. And they aimed at understanding what cultural dimensions are. What are cultures? How do we identify certain patterns in each culture and explain the differences or similarities? Well, for Hall, we could analyze 3 dimensions: proxemics, personal space; time, whether we have a monochronic or polychronic understanding of time; and communication. For Hofstede, the analysis should be rather made in 5 pillars: power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, and masculinity versus femininity. This gender analysis that is brought here by Hofstede, it was at a time in which still persists today a certain attachment of certain, again, stereotypes, gender stereotypes, what femininity is, what masculinity is, and we are questioning this more and more, which is a great thing. In this discussion of these dimensions, what was particularly interesting for me were 2 of those dimensions, and they interact a little bit with the other ones, but I wanted to highlight the time perspective and the communication. So, going first to time. According to Hall, time could be monochronic or polychronic. And what is a monochronic time? It is an understanding of time a little bit like this road that goes straight all the time. There is a sequence of things that you need to fit in together so that you have space for everything. So there is an order. Time is very much like a sequence, one task after another. Time is limited. So we must use it wisely. If we are, for example, late for something, you not only are not using your time wisely, but also if you're late and someone is waiting for you, that can be perceived as one of the acts that are the most disrespectful towards another person, because their time is important and we're wasting it. In a polychronic way of thinking time, there's more flexibility. Time is less rigid. Instead of a road, you can think a little bit more like an octopus. We have different tentacles. There are multiple things that can be done at the same time, and perhaps if we were doing this, but that came up, we can stop this and start doing that. We don't have to plan our lives ahead in weeks. Time is seen more as this flexible entity in which I can fit in it everything that is important for me. It was really interesting when I was listening to this classification of time. Certain situations that for me weren't perceived as cultural differences, they came up to my mind. And I go back to the situation in which I was in a former relationship and going to visiting Rio de Janeiro. And my then boyfriend had prepared a list of things that he wanted us to do. He had already been in Rio de Janeiro, so it was not his first time and things that he absolutely, it was just things that he thought would be nice to do together. And I interpreted the list as ideas, things that could be interesting to do. But his list was divided in days, and I think that parts of time also. And for the first day, we're gonna go, I don't know, to Lagoa, to a place in Rio. And on the second day, we're gonna go to Ipanema. And we were on the bus stop, and suddenly a bus came, and it was the bus for Ipanema. And if you remember, well, Ipanema was what we planned for the second day, but this happened on the first day. So the bus came, and I said, oh great, let's take the bus. And he didn't know how to react. It was like a bomb had fell on the place where we were. And it wasn't that he didn't want to go to Ipanema there, he just really didn't know how to handle the situation. And the bus was arriving, and I was ready to go in, and he was just there and saying, but Ipanema is tomorrow. And I said, yes, but the bus arrived today, now. We don't know when the next bus is gonna come to the place where we plan. Why don't we take this bus now to Ipanema, and tomorrow we do what we planned to do today? And for him, it wasn't possible because Ipanema is for tomorrow. Today is the thing that we planned for today. How can we switch this up? And that became a huge fight, and I couldn't understand the inflexibility, and I think that he couldn't understand what maybe for him was my craziness. And looking at this, I understood that our very conception of time was different.
And then you went and you got a new boyfriend who is equally bad, so you didn't learn anything from this story, obviously. Time has to be respected in order.
In order. This connects to another dimension that Kirsten was discussing in this course, which is our uncertainty avoidance. In some cultures, it is accepted that we just don't know for sure what's going to happen next, so we can't plan everything. And in other cultures, you are much more rigid. It's scary not to know what's going to happen first. It's scary if today you go to Ipanema while you plan to do it tomorrow, then what's next? And when I was discussing this with a friend of mine, she was wondering if this is more about culture or more about ways in which we understand the world a bit psychologically, more internally than collectively. And it took me back to one say that our course on Understand the Germans we started with. And the say is, heaven is where the police are British, the chef's French, the mechanic's German, the lover's Italian, and it's all organized by the Swiss. Hell is where the police are German, the chef's British, the mechanic's French, the lover's Swiss, and it's all organized by the Italians. This is funny because it plays with stereotypes, but it also presumes homogeneity, that we can find it in society, presumes a homogeneous existence of that group, which doesn't exist in reality. So of course, while culture creates this environment that makes more natural certain ways of thinking about life, like lenses, like when you're taking pictures, it's the lens of your camera that facilitates your possibility of perhaps seeing a little bird in a tree or seeing the whole picture. I think that culture, it creates this facilitating environment for one thing or another, but it also depends on the eyes of the spectator, the eyes of the photographer. And applying this to culture, it depends on the individual themselves. So this, whether a person is flexible or not with time, will of course also be very much impacted by their internal way of perceiving life and dealing with what is out of their control, dealing with what is unexpected. But still, it's interesting to note that in some cultures, there is a more monochronic way of understanding time. And going on to the second and last aspect that I wanted to highlight about this intercultural awareness, it is communication. And in this course, Understand the Germans, Kirsten, who was given the course, she was talking about how there is this division of communication, which could be a high context society or a low context society. She explained this in a very interesting way. She said that when she arrives, first thing she does when she arrives in her office is that she makes coffee. But right before making coffee, she goes into the room where she works and she sees her colleague who is already there and says, "I'm making coffee, do you want a coffee?" And the person says, "Yes," and that's it. She said that in different cultures, what one would do would be perhaps to say, "Hey, how are you? This weekend I had a very nice weekend, I did a lot of things, I went to a museum, I met some friends, and I was so excited, but also very tired by the end of the day, and then I went home, but when I was ready to sleep, suddenly my neighbors, who recently got a puppy, by the way, very cute puppy. It was a Labrador, and the puppy, I love the puppy, but the puppy was still having difficulties adjusting to the new house, so the puppy was making a lot of sounds and crying a little bit, which is so sad. I wanted to hug it, but at the same time I couldn't sleep. So I had to, when I came here, it was so difficult to get out of bed, and I really need some coffee. By the way, do you want some? I'm making it right now." And the other person perhaps would say, "Oh, I love puppies also. I totally understand that it's difficult to adjust. I would of course take some coffee, but if you're having a difficult time with sleeping, you know something that's really good? Yoga. It relaxes very much. Perhaps tomorrow we could do yoga together." And she was saying that one form of communication introduces a lot of context to explain the question, which is, "Do you want some coffee?" And the other type of communication goes straight to the point. And when she finalized explaining these differences, one of the persons who was there in the lecture, he was from Iran, and he held his hand and said, "Why would someone possibly choose the second option?" While someone from Portugal said, "Because it's polite." And there we see different ways of perceiving communication. And it's not that one is bad and one is good, it's just different ways, and they open different possibilities. For me, coming from a Brazilian culture, I think that context makes the situation personal, which for me means proximity. It increases our opportunities to make personal bonds, interpersonal connections. And again, I saw myself thinking about my personal experience with Alan. I was writing Norwegian, he was always editing it and taking all of the context. While when I was reading what he was writing, when he was the one fixing something, I was saying, "No, but more context." And we wouldn't understand each other, but that's just different ways of communicating. But there are certain things, for example, when we got married, we went to it was very low key, just in a small town in Norway. Everywhere I was going, I was like, "Oh, we just got married," and I didn't share that context at all. And particularly when we were trying to solve some problems. For example, we went to this hotel and it was our honeymoon, and there was something with the room. I think the room was, I don't remember. But
very dark, facing a parking slot. It wasn't very nice.
I felt it could be special. So I said, I'm gonna try to fix this. And I went downstairs and I fixed it. And I don't think that I would have managed to fix it without the context. I had to go there and say, hey, I just got married.
Don't you remember? I tried to fix it
You
first.
tried to fix it?
And that didn't work because
Of course.
Yeah.
Because why would people care that we want to change rooms? But it wasn't just that we want to change rooms. It was our wedding, and we got such a very nice room. It was on the last floor, and you had windows on the ceiling as well. I don't know if I have a name for that type of window, but I feel that given the context, people care. But at the same time, it might be that with too much context, people will just get confused. What was the answer? What was the question again? Why were we talking about this? But, well, I think that the most important thing and that I would like to say to finalize this video is something that Alan and I say all the time. I learned so much with him, with his culture, with his experiences, and he learned so much with me, with my family, with our culture, with our experiences. And we always say, wow, what an incredible country we would have if we could just get the best from Brazil and the best from Norway. And I think that this is the most exciting thing with intercultural changes, intercultural experiences, intercultural families. We become like a third entity, not completely Brazilian, not completely Norwegian, not completely high context, not completely low context, not completely polychronic, not completely monochronic. We become a mixture of both, and that's really nice. Well, we hope you liked it. If you had some of these experiences, share it here in the comments, and don't forget to follow us. Bye, see you next time.